while back, I made a video about de-influencing vinyl and encouraging folks to go listen to the records that they already own instead of buying whatever's new, talking about the hot, the flavor of the month, whatever it is. And people were generally pretty positive and thinking, you know what, maybe I should be doing this. I don't need to be spending money all the time to listen to records. One comment that was really interesting and I wanted to address today. I went back and tried to answer the comment, but it appeared to have disappeared, so I don't know if the person deleted it or if YouTube removed it. So if you were the person who made this comment, I'm sorry, I was not ignoring you. I thought this was something that maybe more people would want to weigh in on, but also something that we can kind of share to challenge ourselves. If we aren't playing the records in our collection, maybe we should try again. But basically the person's comment was something along the lines of, how on earth can you possibly have records and just never play them? You've bought paperweights, which technically is true. I think one of the distinctions with vinyl versus other collectibles is it is a physical media. There is a function to it. You can play the records, where if I collect, I don't know, Pez dispensers, coffee mugs, or whatever, those might just sit on my shelf and never get used, and that's just an acceptable part of it. But with physical media, it's very, very easy to develop a backlog and get stuff that you haven't played yet, you've never played, that kind of thing. Well, for example, I have tons of retro video games. I have dozens that I've never played before, will never play. Some of them I've played for 5 minutes, and that was it. But those are much more of an investment. Some of those games could take weeks or months to finish, or they might be really, really challenging. I could never finish them, versus a record that might take 45 minutes. So it's much easier to get through the backlog and much more challenging to really have records that you've never played before, in comparison to if I have a bunch of books, it could take weeks to read each of those books. So much easier to kind of hack through the stuff that you've never listened to before. But I started to think, you know what? There's got to be good reasons why I've never listened to some of these records, and I put together a list of 10. Feel free to weigh in as well if there's other reasons why you have records you've never listened to. And again, this is one of those things that we can start to kind of look in the mirror, challenge ourselves a little bit more, and start to play the records we have and enjoy them and share that music versus just jumping on whatever everyone else is talking about at the time. So let's get into it. The first reason that I have records that I've never played before is I bought them thinking that I would get into the artist at a later time. One of the examples of this is I was in a small town a few years back, and this record store had like every Kate Bush record for like $5. I didn't know a ton about her music. I'd heard some good things from some people I really respected, so I bought them all. I don't even remember if I ever listened to them. I think they sat on my shelf for a while. Fast forward a year or two later, I hear like a Kate Bush song in a playlist on Spotify. I love it. I have the entire catalog. I go back, I dig into it, becomes one of my favorite artists. Perfect. On the same coin flip, I remember there's a while where I used to go to every store, thrift store, garage sale, whatever it was, and I'd find Moody Blues records for $1. I think at one point I had like 10 to 15 of them. Those never got played, and I never got into the Moody Blues, and those records were instantly given away when I moved. But it can go one of two ways, but that's one of the reasons. Next is you buy a record at a bad time. We're all guilty of this. We see a record that maybe has been on our want list for a long time. It's an artist we're curious about. We pick it up, and instead of listening to it, we're maybe really digging something else at the time. Maybe we're getting excited to go see a concert, seeing some artists, and the record just kind of gets forgotten about. I've been guilty of this. Something that's more of a recent phenomenon is forgetting that you've ordered a record. Oftentimes we pre-order records when they go on sale or an artist announces a cool variant on their website or whatever it is. You pre-order the record, and the album might come out and you might not get your vinyl for 6 months, a year, 2 years later. By that time, you might have completely forgotten, stopped caring about that record. Maybe you listened to it digitally a couple times and hated it, but you'd already committed, and you get the record and it just kind of sits there. Something else is if you get large hauls. Like for example, I used to always go on trips, especially when I lived in a smaller city, and I would bring back like huge bags of records, and there would usually be a handful that I was really, really excited to check out, and some that were kind of just, maybe I'll pick these up. And oftentimes I would rip through those records that I was really excited about, and some would get kind of tucked off to the side and might have never actually got played. As well, if you've ever purchased a collection or like a large lot of records, this is also very common. If you've bought 50 or 100 records, very tough to get excited and listen to all of the records. Some of them are inevitably going to be maybe just kept and tucked away. Maybe they're okay titles that are worthwhile to clean and keep versus donating or selling, whatever. But for whatever reason, you just don't listen to them. A more embarrassing one, when I was doing my de-influencing kind of challenge, is that you lose records. Within your own collection, you can lose records. I remember a couple times I would be kind of flipping through my bins, and I would find between two thick gatefold jackets there would be like a tiny shrimpy like single pocket record tucked away that got pushed to the back, and I'd have to kind of resurrect it from the back, but I forgot some of those records existed, and some of them were just albums that I'd never actually listened to. They got shelved, they got slid to the back. They were in no man's land, so those might exist in your collection too. The big point of trying to listen to records you already have is going back and not being influenced by what looks the newest, what's the shiniest, whatever it is. Sometimes you've just gotten so used to seeing a record that you've gotten used to flipping past and not listening to it, and that could be to the point where you've literally never listened to records. Just because something's not shiny or new, maybe take a second look, take a listen to it, and you might actually be surprised with what you find. Another thing too is if an album is really outside of your comfort zone. I've definitely been recommended albums. I've heard albums that people have chatted about that are well outside of what's comfortable to me, but maybe it was a title that someone said this is one of the best sounding recordings ever, and I found a copy for like $3, and I thought, you know, what the heck, but it wasn't appealing to me when I actually brought it home. I decided that I was more interested in playing different stuff. So yeah, sometimes it's fun to kind of really push yourself and get out of your comfort zone, but it's understandable if it does take you a minute or if it is a bit harder. As my collection's kind of grown, I've started to spend more money on certain titles instead of getting more riskier titles that are only a few bucks. This has led to some instances where I have more than one copy of a record and one is quite valuable and one is a lot more common or cheaper. I may have an original copy and I may have a cheap reissue. I'll play the cheap reissue, and the original, maybe I've played it once, maybe I've never played it, but I'm just kind of scared, which is kind of stupid. You should play your records, but very, very common that people are afraid to play the record that's worth, you know, $100 when they have an adequate copy that costs $5 to play that one instead. The one that does piss off a lot of vinyl collectors though is if you keep your record sealed. I do think records should be open and played, so if you are keeping a record sealed just for collectability factor, you're probably going to upset some people, but yeah, that's definitely an easy reason why you can't play it. You can't play the cover of a record. And lastly, something that I've been guilty of, and I've done my absolute best to stop doing this because I know I will never do it, but is buying a record that you think is a really good deal because you think you're going to sell it later. Countless times I found a record for $20 knowing that it's a $100 title and I think I'm going to sell it, but I don't. So I've kind of had to swallow my pride and leave a lot of those titles unless they are of at least some interest to me or I know that I will listen to it once or twice. But yeah, it's I probably should just start selling some of those titles. That would give me more money to buy other titles. So they're kind of the reasons that I was able to put together. I know there's definitely more. I know there's a bit of repetition, but yeah, I just wanted to open up the conversation because it is really silly. We should be buying records to play them. If you have a bunch that have never been played before, dive into them. Something that I've installed to kind of try to avoid this, I now have a to-play cube in my collection where records, before they can be categorized and they can be shelved, they have to be listened to and they have to be cleaned. So that's just one way I've helped to eliminate this problem. If you have any other solutions for how you get through your records, I know there's some people who have collections where they, you know, once a year will go A to Z and just try to get through everything. I think I have a few too many records to do that, but something I've definitely considered because there are titles here that have never been played, probably will never be played, but maybe those should just go to someone else who could get more enjoyment out of them. I don't know, just my thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about this topic. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.